Hey friend, thanks for stopping by. I'm going to show you how investing in a training program can absolutely flip your life upside down and put you in a place that you've never been, that you've always hoped you could be, but never were able to get there. Are you ready for that? By the way, it's a biblically based, biblically derived training program that'll grow your business, multiply your sales like nothing you've ever seen. And if you can't see by the end of this presentation how you can easily get a tenfold return on your investment easily, then don't do it. But I'm going to show you how easy it is to absolutely get that. But listen, I wasn't always good at sales. In fact, I spent the first 10 years of my sales career dead center, kind of average. I then moved down to the United States, got a job selling copiers. And on that first day, the vice president said to me, Michael, this is what we expect from you. We expect you for every 4 or 5 demonstrations you do, you should make 1 sale. 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5, 1 out of 4, he says the national average. I don't like being average, but that's the national average. There he was again trying to put me into average. But this time I was determined I didn't want average. He said in the first month, we don't expect any sales, but we expect 2 your second month, 4 a month thereafter, meaning in the first 90 days, I was supposed to make 6 sales in that 90-day period. I thought, what farmer plants 4 rows of corn and prays to God that just one of them comes up? Makes no sense to me. So I said, I'm going to find in the Bible principles and strategies, actual things that I can apply in a tactical way to bring measurable results. And instead of selling 1 out of 4, I intend to sell 1 out of 1. And people thought I was nuts. But you know what? At the quarterly review, the first one I went to, which is middle of April of 1986, I'd already been in the territory 90 days at that point. I started mid-January, so January, February, March. There you go. And at the end of that meeting, it was my turn to get up. And I said, I've been here 90 days. And I put my results on the wall like everybody had to do. And I said, I've been here 90 days. I've done 22 demonstrations. And I'm pleased to report that I have 22 sales. Now, that was 1 out of 1. And 3.5 times the goal they set for me. By the way, I never saw anybody hit that goal. I was on to something. I went from average to I was going like this and then boop, like that. Amazing. And this was from purposefully using biblical strategies that I'm going to share with you. It's the most amazing thing. Some people might think, well, you just had a lucky quarter. No, I didn't. It wasn't lucky. It wasn't like I did 22 demos and made 1 sale for 22 copiers. No, it was 1, 1, 1, 1, 1 times 22. But how did that happen? Well, by the end of the year, I had to maintain a closing average at a little over 90%. Not bad in a world that 25% is the norm. So I was on to something. They kind of thought, maybe Michael Pink's got something interesting. They used to kid me saying I was from Mars, but I'm not. But anyway, they thought, okay, maybe he's got something. So they made me the sales manager, and they gave me a team of 5 people that were not doing so well. Well, 10 months later, their results were up 430% over the year before. That is so important because, you see, we just proved that it was transferable. People that were struggling, that were failing, were not doing well. I was allowed to train them and teach them, and they went up 430%. Not luck. One of the really cool things about this whole thing was that when I went from average to like that, I didn't have to change who I was. I didn't have to try to become somebody I wasn't. And when I took over that sales team of 5, there were a number of people who were trying to become something they weren't because they thought this is what a salesperson is. The stereotypical kind of thing. I had one guy in particular, his name is David. David was an incredible man, a young man at the time. We both were, but he was trying to become what they said. I said, don't do that. That's not who you are. Be authentic. Be authentically you. He had integrity, he had a good work ethic. He was honest as the day is long, but he wasn't succeeding. In fact, in his first 90 days, he had yet to make a single sale. Okay. And he'd actually turned in his resignation. They were going to accept it, but they said, Michael, maybe you work with him a day and see if you think he's salvageable. I did. I worked with him for a day, and I said, you know what? He's the best guy you have on the team. And they said, why? I said, because he's got integrity. He's got honesty. He's got a great work ethic. Can't teach those things. You either do it or you don't. You either made that decision or you haven't. He had. I said, I know what he's missing, and I'll help him do that. And you know what? David went from dead last to number 1, and he maintained number 1 position, not just for a week or a day or a month or a year, but for 25 years with that company. He was number 1 or number 2 out of a good-sized company with multiple offices around the state. So yeah, he did really well with it. And I had a good chance to really help him get there. So I'm excited to share with you what this is. And it comes from a blueprint. The Bible says in Isaiah 48:17 says, I'm the Lord, the God who teaches you to profit. Well, when I read that, I said, Lord, I could use that. Teach me how to profit. And you know what? You got to find what the Bible calls the ancient paths where the good way is. And you'll find rest for your souls. You see, What I had prior to that was a lot of anxiety for my soul, right? You're not really at rest. You're not really at peace. And yet the Bible offers you rest for your soul when you find the ancient paths. Well, those ancient paths, my friend, are found in Scripture. They're found in what I call the Moses blueprint. Others call it the Tabernacle of Moses. It's this incredible blueprint in Scripture that'll absolutely revolutionize your life. It gives you the key for everything you need for success in life. It actually consists of 7 different stations, if you will, on 3 different levels. And you can live life on level 1, level 2, or level 3. And it goes from, it's sort of like a 30-fold potential, 60-fold potential, and 100-fold potential. It goes from doing things completely in the natural, by natural light, to doing things that are illuminated by the Holy Spirit, of eliminating the Scriptures, giving you God's ways, God's insight, the way God does things, pulled out of His Word. And then you take that knowledge and you go back out to level 1 in the realm of the natural and you implement it. Or then there's also level 3, which is the realm of the supernatural, which in the Moses blueprint was this place that was illuminated by the presence of God. There was no daylight, there was no candlelight, it was just the supernatural presence of God. And you can tap into that as well. So it takes you from 30-fold to 60-fold to 100-fold potential return. That's a metaphor. It's not an exact science, but you get the idea. I'm going to show you my favorite part that I've spent a lot of time in was really mining out level 2 strategies. Level 1 is phenomenal, by the way. I mean, more people have become millionaires doing level 1 probably than anything else because they didn't know there was a level 2 or level 3. Level 1 has to do with character and competence. And there are some very specific things with character having to do with accountability, for example, and teachability, and generosity, and the strategy of preeminence, for example. All those things are wrapped around the 5 sacrifices that were offered inside the outer court or level 1 of this Moses tabernacle, or this Moses template, if you will, or the Moses blueprint. And then you have where the priest would get prepared to go inside level 2. And this thing was this brass bowl where they would do a 3-step process. When you take that 3-step process and you put it in business terms, I'm telling you, and then you do it, of course, you do that, you will grow your business faster and more reliably and more consistently than anything I know. Let me give you a pretty incredible example. In 2015, a very good friend of mine had a commercial real estate firm, brokerage company. He had 12 agents, 9 of them had left. He was down to 3. They were looking for a job and he was thinking of closing it down. He said, "Can you help me?" I said, "Sure can." The last 6 months of the year, I worked side by side with him, and we had a 900% increase in sales and a multi-million-dollar profit. Naturally, he was pretty tickled. He said, "Can you help me do it for 1 more year?" I said, "Okay, we'll do it a full year." At the end of our 2-year period, we now had a 6,300% growth rate for 2 years. Not too shabby. And he said, Michael, I'm wanting to get in the Inc. 500 list. I really want to do it, but we have to have a 3-year growth track record. Can you help me for 1 more year?" I said, "Okay, I'll do that." At the end of the 3rd year, we had an 11,350% growth rate, and it became the fastest growing real estate brokerage in the history of the Inc. 500 on their list 2 years in a row, and the 16th fastest growing privately held company in America on the Inc. 500 list. Pretty impressive. And by the way, we did it without using high pressure, no manipulation, no working 10 times harder, all by following the biblical blueprint that I'm about to show you. This is a rendering of the blueprint that I talk about all the time, the Moses blueprint, the 7 ancient paths to wealth, wisdom, and the wonder of God. It's amazing. This is a detailed pattern. God said in Exodus, make it exactly the way I show you. There's a pattern, follow this pattern. It's exactly what I want you to do. He was very concerned about making sure it was precise. Well, I've used that pattern, used that model, because I know what it can do for business, and it's astounding. It takes these 7 areas, as you can see here, these 7 things, if you will, and they're in 3 major areas, level 1, level 2, and level 3, outer court, inner court, and holy of holies, otherwise known as the Tabernacle of Moses. And it has all the secrets that you need for business and success in life, encoded, if you will, or buried into, or symbolized by those very articles that you see I'm pointing arrows to. Now, one of the things I want to tell you about is this. I mean, in the training program, we've got 150 videos inside there with strategy after technique and tactic, all kinds of good stuff. But I'm going to show you 3 of them. One of them is the Moses questioning strategy. I've got a question for you. Have you ever, this is a level 2 strategy, have you ever made a sales pitch or a presentation to anybody, okay, about your product, your service, your ideas, whatever it is you were trying to persuade them of, and you thought you did a really good job, but they didn't take advantage, they didn't buy, they didn't seem interested at the end of it? Has that ever happened to you? I'm pretty sure it has. It's happened to all of us if we've been in sales any length of time, of course. And the thing is, you either didn't know why they weren't interested, or they gave you some lame excuse that you didn't really totally believe, correct? Maybe they even went dark on you. Maybe they wouldn't return your calls, answer your email, or even reply to your texts. That's the kind of thing that happens when this is happening. You think, what is it? What is the reason for it? Why did they not respond favorably to your offer? Do you know? I know the common reasons why this happens. And when they didn't respond, let me ask you another question. What was the effect on you? Certainly you lost time, you lost some of your earning potential, and maybe even a bit of your self-esteem, because after all, nobody enjoys rejection. Nobody enjoys the feeling of being turned down. I understand that. So what was the root of it? One of the common roots was this: failure to ask the right questions. See, what happens is a lot of times salespeople, they think they're supposed to show up and throw up, is what I say. That's what they think their job is. But no, actually, you should ask the right questions. The Bible says in Proverbs 18, to answer before listening is a folly and a shame. In other words, to make a presentation to somebody without finding out what matters to them, what's important to them, and why it's important to them is a folly and a shame. Don't make that mistake. So here's a stat for you might find interesting. Sales reps asking 5 or more questions. This is according to the Huthwaite Corporation. Close 72% more sales than sales reps asking 2 questions or less. But I'm going to add something to that. Sales reps asking 5 or more strategic questions can easily double their sales. Forget about 72% increase compared to those asking 5 or more non-strategic questions. You see, a lot of salespeople say, well, hey, how's the wife? How's the kids? How's the weather? How's whatever it is, right? And so maybe they get the 5 questions in that one, but they're not strategic. Not really. I'm going to show you a strategy that will blow your mind. Now, it's called the Moses questioning strategy. It's one of my favorites, although I've got a lot of favorites, let me tell you. But let me tell you how this came about. I read in the book of Numbers, 13th chapter, there was a passage where Moses was getting ready to send the spies, 12 spies, into the promised land before invading it. And he wanted some reconnaissance done. He wanted some information, okay? And so he had 7 questions he had to have answered. Well, when I noticed there were 7 questions in that passage in Numbers 13, I thought, wait a minute, let's go a little deeper, because, you see, Moses knew that they were going to be met with resistance. If there was resistance, that meant there was going to be some risk. And if there was risk and they were successful, there would be great reward. So when you think about it, resistance, risk, and reward, that sounds an awful lot like your business and mine. Whether you're in sales or own your own company, we're always running into resistance. We're taking a risk with our time, our talent, our treasure. And if we're successful, there's a good reward, hopefully, right? So what were the 7 things he had to have answered? What were the implications of those 7 questions? And how do you make application from those implications? What were the applications? And so I studied it probably for 2 or 3 days, just nothing but that, in my office, on my knees at times, praying, saying, God, show me what this means and how you can apply it to sales and business. When I thought I had it understood, I had written it out, hadn't done anything with it yet. And by the way, it would have preached good. It would have been so good. But the thing is, it wasn't proven. I didn't know. It just sounded really good, right? You don't want something that just sounds good and maybe it makes you feel, that's got to work. Well, I'm not like that. I want to make sure it works. As it turned out, I had a client in the air conditioning business, wholesale business, meaning they supplied a certain brand of air conditioning units to all the dealers in town in that particular city that did heat and air type of work in your home. You know, you want somebody to come fix your air conditioning or install a new air conditioner, you call the dealer. And these guys were the distributors that sold to the dealers, and they sold their particular brand. Well, the owner of this particular company had a good-sized sales force. They operated in 2 or 3 different states. And he said to me, Michael, there's a big contractor here in town. We've been calling on him twice a month for 6 years. I've taken him breakfast, lunch, dinner. He's been at my house for dinner, met my wife. My wife and I have been at their house for dinner. We've gone to movies together. But in 6 years, he said, I haven't got a nickel's worth of business. You got any ideas? I said, as a matter of fact, I do. I got 7 questions I want you to ask him. And he looked at me really strangely. I don't know that he was a believer. I don't think he was. And I said, well, they're not really 7 questions. They're 7 topics. And I said, there's a lot of questions you can ask under each topic. He said, could you write them out? I said, sure. I prepared a sheet for him that looked like this. Front and back, it's a menu of probably 100 questions. And I said, pick and choose, but they're in 7 categories. And he went out and he asked them. I think it was on a Wednesday. And he asked a lot of those questions. And as a result of asking those questions, the air conditioning dealer said, you know what? Give me a quote. So on Thursday, he gave him a quote. On Friday, he received a purchase order for $60,000. Now picture this, 6 years, twice a month, good old boy kind of thing. Everybody's buddy, no business. 1 call, the right questions, strategic questions, not about the ball game, not about politics, not about your wife and kids. Those are fine. but they're not strategic in and of themselves. You ask the right questions, which is what the Moses questioning strategy is all about. You ask those questions, which he did. He got a PO for $60,000. Now, maybe you think he's lucky. He didn't think so. In fact, he called an emergency sales meeting. He put me in front of 18 of his sales guys, and he held up that piece of paper. He said, I don't know what this is, and I don't know why it works, but every one of you are going to have to do it. And Michael's going to show you exactly how to do it. And I was to train these guys, and they were a little bit reluctant, frankly, because it seemed to them to be so strange, but nonetheless, I did. And they were required by their employer to actually ask those questions on every call heading into the next month. Now, just for clarity, this was the end of March. We're heading into April. The preceding April, they had done 1.2 million in sales. They're hoping this April to do 1.3. But instead of that, because they were required to ask these questions on every call, even though they didn't want to and didn't like it, didn't even agree with the philosophy, they did it. And at the end of the month, I checked back with him and said, how did it go? And he had done 1.7 million instead of 1.2 or 1.3. 1.7, a $550,000 increase. He was ashen faced. He was like, well, I don't even know what happened. Where did you learn this from? And boy, was he surprised when I told him I learned it from Moses. I mean, it totally shocked him. But anyway, the point is that it absolutely worked, not just with one situation, but universally. I've used that over and over and over again. Now, let me show you specifically the Moses questioning strategy on the screen here. Okay, here it is. It starts off in Numbers 13. It says, Then Moses sent them to spy out Canaan, and he said, Go up this way to the south and go up to the mountains and see the land, what it is. That's question number one. This is about big picture questions, circumstantial questions, learning relevant information about your prospect, their business, their history, maybe even their family or whatever it is, depending on what it is you're selling, of course. But general circumstantial questions, lay of the land. That's what we're talking about here. The next category that I'm wanting to talk about is there any wood? This has to do with purpose, because with wood, you build your house, you build your dream house, you build your fishing boats, you build your farm implements, you build your life, you build your goals, your vision. It's all that. So what are they trying to build? What do they want? How is it going? What motivates them? Is there any wood? This is about purpose questions, if you will. The third category is whether the land they dwell in is good or bad, fat or lean. So there's two questions there. So that brings us up to 4. This has to do with potential. Essentially what you wanted to do is to qualify them. Do they fit your target profile? Is it good land or bad land? And is it fat or lean, meaning is it working? Is what they're doing working? The way that they're operating their business, the systems that they use that you may be going to try to improve on or sell your product into, how is what they're doing already working? And there's something we call the pain index, where you basically identify a problem, assess the cause and effect, look at the implications, and talk about what's next. It's called the pain index, and it fits hand in glove with the Moses questioning strategy. Then the fourth area is whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak, few or many. You notice there's 2 more questions here. It has to do with problems, the people that are going to be resisting you, the people that are dwelling there, the competition. Sometimes the competition is their own mindset. It doesn't have to be somebody else. But you want to find out what are the biggest challenges, what are the strengths and weaknesses of competitive vendors, competitive excuses, competitive arguments, and find out what those are so that you know what you have to come up against or what you have to counter with. And then lastly, whether the cities they dwell in are tents or strongholds. This has to do with permanence. And what you're really trying to find out is 2 things. Is the client, your prospect, thinking long-term or short-term? Are they always looking at the cheapest price? That's short-term thinking. Or are they thinking long-term? Secondly, what about the competition? Maybe they're already the vendor of choice and you're wanting to unseat them. Well, have they built a fortress of customer service or not? You see, when it speaks about cities being tents or strongholds, if it's tents, that means they can leave on a moment's notice. They're here today, gone tomorrow. Strongholds, they're saying, we intend to stay here. So you need to understand that. And what is the customer's perspective? And what is their supplier's perspective? And what is the competition doing, long-term or short-term? That's the Moses questioning strategy in a nutshell. Finally, he says, be of good courage and bring some of the fruit of the land, which is a whole other thing I can tell you about. Here's a quick testimony for you. Ken Delaney, Sales and Marketing Director, said, since I've been using this program, Selling Among Wolves, I've seen my sales increase by up to 100% conservatively. I also signed our company's largest client, an account worth over $8.2 million. I never would have called on them if I hadn't done what was suggested in the program. I remember he called me on the phone. He actually told me about this, and he was sitting out front of a major hospital, and he decided, I'm going to try this thing Michael Pink does, and he listened to the Moses questioning strategy. I think he said he listened to it 2 or 3 times. I can't remember, but he
got it down, he made notes, and then he went and made a cold call on a major account, but timing was right, so they invited him in. Instead of just making a pitch, he asked them questions that opened up the opportunity. Then he made his presentation and closed the sale. He was ecstatic. Now, when you ask the right questions, my friend, it multiplies your chances of getting the sale precisely because you've uncovered their pain, their goals, and what they value. So how many times have you worked hard on a proposal, you made a great case for your offer, but it went nowhere? And what if you got half of those deals that you're currently losing? What would that be worth to you? This is what I want you to do. Do the math on this. It's very, very important. What if you are losing just one deal a month that you know you were the right solution for, and you could cut that loss rate in half? Would that be worth it to you? You know, whether it's one deal a month or one deal a week or one deal a year, it kind of depends on what size the deal is, right? I had a client that sold this kind of equipment you see here on your screen, and they asked me to work with one of their salesmen that had been with them for 6 months. He looked really nice, dressed sharp and everything, really friendly. Everybody liked him, but he had yet to make his first sale. And so they were a little discouraged by that and wondered what to do. So I worked with him, and I went out with him on some calls. And what happened was we went to this one particular place that he had stopped in about a month earlier and dropped off a brochure with a price on it. And I said, oh, what's been your follow-up? Any particular proposal? He said, no, I just left the brochure for them, and I thought it's been a month. I'll see if they're ready to buy. My goodness. Anyway, so that was the plan that he had. So we went in, and as it turned out, to the owner of this company, is a manufacturing, they manufactured precision parts. And the owner of the company came out and said, hey, you're too late. I just bought from your competition. So immediately the salesman turned on his heels and started walking back out the door. I said, hang on a second. I said, sir, you know, I'm not really with this company. I'm a consultant brought in to evaluate what they're doing well, what they're doing not so well. Obviously, they didn't earn your business here, but, you know, would you mind telling me something? When you say you bought from the competitor, have you signed a contract? Yes. Have you given them payment? He said, yes, I FedExed the check with the contract yesterday. They received it this morning. And he went on to say, furthermore, we already have it delivered, it's installed, and it's operating in our plant right now. I said, do you mind if I take a look? I'd love to see it. He said, sure. And he said, by the way, it was $15,000 less for the very same thing. So you can see, okay, it's 15 grand less. It was 53,000 instead of 68 grand. And it was already installed and operating. So what do you think the chances are that we're going to walk out with a sale now? You know, slim to none, and Slim left the building a long time ago, right? I went back and started asking him questions about the machine, about what it was doing. And it made a bit of a thunking noise. And I said, well, what's that thunking noise? What happened there? And as it turned out, it was a bit of a malfunction. So I kept questioning and questioning and questioning, using the Moses questioning strategy, and it revealed flaw after flaw after flaw after problem until he was so uncomfortable with his decision. I knew they had a 3-day right of rescission, but I didn't tell him. His supervisor chimed in and said, you know, we have 3 days before we become bound and locked in on this thing. And I said, really, how's that work? And long story short, after asking a lot of questions, after asking, using the pain index for this, so I said, what would you like to do? And he simply said, let's go for lunch. And we did. Long story short, he signed a contract, wrote us a check. We walked out with a sale that never would have happened. But it wasn't because I knew how to, sell the virtues of that equipment. I didn't even know how to turn it on or where the on-off switch was. But what I did know was how to ask questions, the right questions, strategic questions, and that's what the Moses questioning strategy will do for you. So think about that. What's a deal worth to you? In that case, it was worth $68,000 to the owner of that company. I don't know what the commission would have been for the sales guy, but I know the owner was happy to get a $68,000 check in, and you know what? Probably the profit was $30,000 or something. It wasn't all profit, but $20,000, $30,000 wasn't a bad deal, right? It was absolutely wonderful for them. But it's different for everyone, and it depends on whether you're selling popsicles, as I say, or a popsicle stand. Now, I'm going to give you one last example so you understand how this works. I was doing some work with a consulting company. They were a management consulting firm, and basically what they would do is they would telemarket, set up 12 to 15 appointments for him to stop by in a week with the CEO typically or CFO of decent-sized companies and sell them their management consulting analysis. That was the deal. On average, it seemed to me, if my memory serves me correctly, he was making about one sale a week. Made about $1,000 a sale. And so he'd have a dozen appointments, make one sale. That's what he was doing. But he was using these high-pressure closing techniques because somebody told him that 60% of the sales were made after the 5th closing attempt. So he was doing this nonsense, which is crazy. Let me ask you a question. I don't know if you're married or not, but you know somebody who is. And I always say this. when you ask your spouse to marry you, or when your husband or spouse asks you to marry you, did they say, hey, would you like to get married on the 15th, or would the 30th be better? And if you make up your mind by 5 o'clock, I'll take you to Hawaii. No, they probably didn't do that. And if they did, you're probably not married to them, right? So the point is that these pressure techniques are not good. They're not productive. Sure, you might get a sale sometime, but it's not the way to do it. So anyway, he was using all those high pressure stuff. It was embarrassing. Finally, the guy was throwing us out of the office, and I stood up and I said, listen, I'm not with this company. I'm a consultant. Clearly, this man didn't have anything to say that was of any use, interest, or value to you. Am I correct? He said, you're absolutely right. I said, sir, can I ask you a question? He said, sure. I did, and then another, and then another. And I opened up that Moses questioning strategy. I used the pain index that we talk about. And before you know it, in about 15 minutes, he stopped the conversation, and he said, you know what? I think I'll do it. And he signed the deal, gave us a check, and we walked out of there, and the salesman earned $1,000 commission. Now, my point in telling you this story is, in this case, he made an extra grand, the sales guy did. But he went from making 1 sale a week to now 2, right? We just doubled his sales. If he could do that, just ask those kind of questions all the time, it would most likely double his sales, or triple or quadruple or something like that. But that's not what he was doing when I started. So there you go. It kind of depends what you're selling, but it's a highly effective methodology. So as you can see, we just doubled his income by picking up one of the 11 presentations that he was losing. What would that look like for you? Is this making sense? Do you get where I'm going with this? The Moses questioning strategy is something that if you learn it and you begin to use it, it will help you. Whether it's 1 sale a week, 1 sale a day, 1 sale a year, kind of depends on what you're doing. So I can't say that for you, but maybe you can figure it out. With the air conditioning company, in addition to the $500,000 increase in a month, they now had a strategy to boost their sales dramatically, not only for the rest of the year, but for as long as he owned the company, which, by the way, he sold not long after for several $million. Listen, you have to think larger than just the next deal or the deal you lost. Think in terms of the next year and the rest of your professional life. This strategy will earn you an awful lot of money over the years to come, and that increase can start right now. What you need to think about is, how many deals have you not gotten that you think you should have gotten, that if you did get them, would have earned you more income? That's what you have to calculate. I can't do that for you. And what if you only got half of those? What would that be worth to you? As I pointed out earlier, the Huthwaite Corporation proved that sales reps asking 5 or more questions close 72% more sales than those asking 2 questions or less. You ask the right questions, you'll do even better. As I like to say, what if all you did was close 72% more sales? You didn't double your sales. What would that be worth to you? I think for most people, it'd be worth a lot. But forget the 72% for a minute. In the third strategy I'll be showing you shortly, you're going to see how a modest 15% increase in the right places can more than double your sales. It's incredible.
Okay, let's talk about strategy number 2, the negotiating secrets of the Apostle Paul. They're awesome. I want to ask you a question. Have you ever worked hard to get a deal, but the buyer was a tough negotiator, and he gave you lots of reasons why your price was too high, the value wasn't there, or some other thing, right? You've ever had that? As a result, you ended up making way too many concessions just to get the deal. At the end of the day, there wasn't a lot of profit, a lot of meat left on the bone. Most people have had that experience if you're in sales. But the thing is, you didn't take into consideration the fact, and a lot of people forget this, that people never negotiate on something they don't want, which means if they're negotiating, they want what you have. And a lot of buyers are really good at negotiating, and they try to hide the fact that they really want what you have. In fact, really what they're doing is they want to know, are they getting a good deal? They know they want what you have. Now they want to know, are they getting a good deal? And so they're testing your barriers, your boundaries, your pricing, etc. And you think you're making a sale just so you can earn a nice commission. But what they think is, hey, I want what you got. I'm going to try to sell the salesperson on the rationale that their price is too high or whatever, get them to think like I'm thinking so I can secure a great deal for myself. That's what they try to do. Bottom line is you get the deal, but they got a deal. There's a big difference. So here's the impact of a skinny deal. There's not a lot of joy or celebration when you get it. Like, I got the deal, but whew, you know. So what happens is you try to make it up next time, but it doesn't work because you haven't changed your strategy. And when you keep doing the same thing, you know, you're going to keep getting the same result. You end up working harder and harder for less and less until you're burned out. And that's a sad state. I'm going to show you true win-win negotiations that use what I call magnetic appeal versus brute force to close deals where everyone is happy with the outcome. Are you interested? It's called The Negotiating Secrets of the Apostle Paul. Let me tell you the origin story real quick. You see, Paul was in prison for his faith. All right? This is 2,000 years ago. And while in prison, he meets a guy named Onesimus. And Onesimus is a runaway slave who was in jail for who knows what, some criminal behavior, presumably. And while in prison, Paul wins Onesimus to Christ, refers to him later as his son in the Lord. He won him to Christ. And during that process, Paul finds out that Onesimus not only is a runaway slave, and bear in mind that in the Roman Empire at that time, 60% of the population were slaves. Life was cheap. If you ran away, it was a capital crime. So Paul knew all that. And he also happened to know that Onesimus, when he told him the story, was the slave of Philemon, Paul's very good friend. So Paul writes this letter to his friend Philemon, appealing on behalf of Onesimus, who he had just led to Christ. And what he wants to have happen is he wants Onesimus to go back, and instead of being punished, beaten, or worse, yet killed, he wants Onesimus to be welcomed by his friend Philemon as if it was Paul, his very best friend, walking through the door. Tall order, especially in that day. You've got to understand what was the context of the time. And Paul actually says, I might be very bold in Christ to command you what is fitting, but for love's sake, I rather appeal to you. See, Paul was always going on the appeal versus the force. Very powerful principle in sales and in negotiating. He appeals to the heart. You know why? It's because that's where the decision is made versus the mind, where the decision is being justified. The heart says, this is what I want. I've decided I want that. The mind says, let me see how I can justify that for you. And there's a big difference between the heart and the mind. And the mind rarely will justify what the heart doesn't want. Now, here's something you may not know. In our bodies, we are electromagnetic fields, if you will, and to some extent we got that going on. And our brain gives off a certain signal that can be measured, but the heart gives off an electromagnetic field 5,000 times stronger, more powerful than what the brain gives off. What does that mean? That means you can sense it. You can sense when somebody says, I love you, and they don't, and when somebody says, I love you, and they do. In fact, sometimes that is so strong, they don't have to say anything. They can just look at you and you know it because your heart is radiating it. Well, it's true in all kinds of things. It could be love, it could be hate, it could be anger, it could be jealousy. It could be any number of things. The heart radiates this, okay? So Paul is appealing to the heart. The heart is a very important thing. People sense it. So I'm going to say in your sales process, whether you're negotiating or making a presentation, always appeal to the heart and never underestimate the power of appealing to somebody's heart. Let me give you a quick example. I've got many, many examples of where this negotiating secrets are so powerful. I mean, negotiating with the EPA, negotiating for the acquisition of a 25% stake in a nationally known 100-year-old magazine publication, business publication, which was gotten without any money, by the way, 25% interest. But here's a great story I'll give you. This happened to be a client of mine, and he had a assisted living facility. And that assisted living facility had, about 11 years prior to that, borrowed money from the state in a bond. It was a bond. It was a multi-million-dollar loan. I think it was a 25-year note. And at the time, I believe the interest rate was around 9% when he got it. But over the next 11 years, nationally, interest rates went down, but his stayed the same. And so for the preceding 2 or 3 years, he would go to the state and he'd say, hey, can I get a break? Can you lower my interest rate? No. Well, can I go ahead and just pay it off? I'll refinance with somebody else. No, you're stuck in this. You cannot pay it off unless you pay off the sum total of all the payments, which would be like 3 times the price of the building or the project. So that didn't make any sense. And so he kept on appealing to them. So one day he said, well, Michael, can you help me with this? And I said, well, sure. And I said, set up an appointment at the Capitol, the state Capitol, and let's go. And so he called them and they said, no, we're not going to meet with you. There is nothing to discuss. We are not changing this deal. So he said, Michael, I don't think you really need to come out here. I said, no, I think I do. This is important. So I flew out there. We went there. I went to his office. And I said, here's what I need you to do. Get your Bible, bring it. Now, he was a Christian, loved Jesus, loved him with all his heart. And he's a Gideon. He's a big believer in the Word of God. Trust me. But he, like so many Christians, had never looked at the Bible and said, I can actually pull a script, if you will, what some people call a swipe file. But I can pull that from the scripture and apply that directly to sales or to negotiating or to my business. Most people, if they're Christians, they think, well, the Bible tells you to be, honest and work hard, have a good work ethic and those kinds of things, be diligent and all that. It does. But there's a lot more if you want to look. So I said, bring your Bible. We got in this conference room, open up to Philemon, and we spent the next 6 hours writing one letter. Now, you might think 6 hours to write a letter, that's a long time. Yeah, 6 hours. Why? Because there are 31 strategies that I found in the 25 verses of the letter Paul wrote to Philemon, which is right before the book of Hebrews in your New Testament. And I found those strategies and I said, let's take each one at a time. appeal to the heart, use appeal versus force, different things. Paul said, I'm writing to you, Paul the aged. I'm in prison for my faith. He's appealing to the man's heart. There's a lot of strategies in there. So anyway, I said, let's figure out how we can do this with your circumstances. And so we took the time, wrote a long letter, a letter, but it was email. And we pushed send, and we waited. They didn't reply that day or the rest of that week or even the next week. He thought it was a lost cause. But after 2 full weeks, they wrote back and said, essentially, we've lowered your interest rate from, I think it was 9% down to 3%, saving him $9,000 per month in interest. $9,000 a month. That's over $100,000 a year with 14 years left on his mortgage. That's $1.4 million of pure profit. Now you have to understand something. He was making in his business a 7% profit. So in order to make $1.4 million in profit, he'd have to do $20 million in revenue. And by the way, he was doing $2 million a year. So it would take him 10 years to earn $1.4 million in profit. Think of the wear and tear on the equipment, on the staff turnover, everything that would happen in that 10-year period. All of it was shrunk down to one long letter writing session, took 6 hours. Boom. We had to wait a couple of weeks and he got that reduction. So I'm telling you, that's just one of many, many stories I can give you, but it seems to be so oftentimes counterintuitive, but it's highly, highly practical. You're going to love it.
So quick recap. I said at the beginning of this video, if you don't see how you can get a tenfold return on your investment with this training, you probably shouldn't do it.
I think that's a pretty fair statement. A lot of people are going to get that return right away. The Moses questioning strategy alone can get that return in a single transaction many times. The negotiating secrets of Paul have gotten people, as I showed you, $1 million return or more. I realize it depends on what you're negotiating, right? So if you're not negotiating a multi-million-dollar loan, maybe you're just negotiating a purchase on a car or the purchase price for a refrigerator or something at a yard sale. I understand it's going to vary, but I'm going to tell you, there's one 7-word question inside the negotiating secrets of Paul that I've used countless times just to save money on hotel rooms. When I'm traveling, you travel a lot, you spend a lot of time in hotels sometimes. Well, what's the rate? I got that down and down and down by asking a 7-word question inside the negotiating secrets of Paul. So there's a lot of value in there, but this one I'm really excited about as well. It's called Follow a Proven Process. The Bible says, this is Jesus actually speaking about himself. He says, the Son can do nothing of himself, but what he sees the Father do. For whatever he does, the Son of God does in like manner. Now I want you to notice something. It says the Son of God does in like manner. He doesn't say, well, that's not a bad thought, Father. I'm going to try it this way, or I'm going to put a little nuance on it. No, he says it. I'm going to do exactly what you say. I'm going to follow the process or the pre-planned way that you have. That, my friends, translates well into business as well. There is something called the power of a proven process. And I want you to understand this. It's very, very powerful. 90% of all companies that use a formal guided sales process were ranked as the highest performing by the Sales Marketing Association. Number one. Number two, 70% of business forecasts were accurate when using a defined sales process, according to the task group. Next thing. Businesses with a standard sales process see up to a 28% increase in revenue as compared to those who do not. That's the Harvard review, Harvard University giving a review. That's almost a 30% increase right there. And nearly 70% of all sales reps don't follow a process. Listen, if you don't have a process that you follow, how much would a nearly 30% increase in sales mean to you personally, financially? What would that mean to you? I don't know. You know the math on it. I always say, do the math yourself. Why? Because the Bible says in Psalm 90, verse 12, to bring the heart to wisdom. You see, the heart wants something. I don't want you to make a decision on this based purely on emotion. Sure, it's a good thing that you want it, but now can it be justified? So you need to do the math, because wisdom, it says in Proverbs, is the principal thing. It's the premier thing. It's the numero uno. So we want to apply wisdom to your decision. All right. I can't guarantee your results, obviously, but what would an increase of half that size, let's say 15%, what would that mean to you over the year? Do the math. I always say do the math. Okay. And I'm going to show you, if you got a 15% increase at various places in your process, you can get a huge increase. It'll blow your mind. But maybe first of all, you think, well, you have a process. Okay, great. You have a sales process. But do you track the metrics that make up your process? Do you track your conversion rates along the way? Because the metrics tell you where, of course, to improve. So let me ask you, when you get to the end of the month or the end of the quarter, the end of the year, have you ever felt dissatisfied or disappointed or even deeply disappointed with where you ended up? Have you? And maybe worse yet, you didn't even know why. You didn't know why it was there. Like, I just know sales were down. And how did that happen? Where did it fall apart? And most likely you only track your final sales, not the process or your metrics. And without that, it's very hard to bring focused improvement because you don't know where you're weak. You don't know where it's falling down. You don't know where it's breaking apart. Okay, it's very, very important. And if you don't have a process, a system of tracking metrics, it's very difficult to improve. So here's a question. What's the impact on you when you don't have satisfactory sales? Well, what do you mean, Michael? Well, how does that impact your life? I mean, obviously it impacts your income. We know that, but how does that impact your life? I mean, maybe you want to put your kids in private school. Maybe you want to send missionaries over. Maybe you want to take a mission trip. Maybe you just want to take a much needed vacation or get a new car or whatever it is. That's the beginning of the impact on your life. The problem is you don't know why or where the failure is happening because you don't have a defined process and a way of tracking the metrics that contribute to your success. And if you don't address that, you're going to just have to learn to live with less. And is that what you really want? I don't think so. Remember David? I mentioned him at the beginning of the video. He was the young man that had made 0 sales in his first 90 days with the company when I first became a sales manager at the copier company, right? And then he went from dead last, he went to number 1 or number 2 for 25 years after turning in his resignation and not being accepted. He wrote back recently, actually. He said, Michael wore his faith like I wanted to. He was the best teacher of the art of selling I've ever known. And this is David Gentry, runspotrunnashville.com. You can go check him out if you want to. It really happened. It was an amazing story. But one of the things that we did was we looked at his process. And because we could look at the process, see what the company was looking at is his sales weren't there. What's wrong? I looked at the process and I could identify where the problem was. He had a great work ethic. So it wasn't about lack of effort. He had great integrity, honesty, all those things. But I could see where the process was falling apart. It was at a very specific stage, the 3rd step of the sale. That's where it was falling. And I knew exactly why when I was with him. And because of that, we could address that and fix everything. And off he went to do extremely well. Okay, right now I'm going to show you a process that cooperates with how God wired us. It's so important to go with the way God wired all of us versus going against it because you're going to get resistance. You might get the sale sometimes, but you don't want to do that. You want to go with the way God wired people. That's what we're going to do. And it's, by the way, loosely modeled inside level 2 of the blueprint. So let me show you. Okay, I call it the easy close sales process because if you need to use a hard close, you're definitely doing it wrong. And so it's an acronym. The E stands for engage, where you arouse interest, get somebody interested in what you have. You have, let's say, 100 prospects and you get 30 of them interested, something to that effect, whatever the numbers are. From there, once they're interested, you need to assess and ask questions. By the way, that's a step that many people skip over completely. They got interest, they go straight into the presentation or the solution. The solution, of course, is where you want to create desire, but you want to do it based on what you know from asking the right questions that we talked about in the Moses questioning strategy. From there, it goes to justification and negotiation, where there's some yielding back and forth on terms and pricings, that kind of thing, typically. And then you close the deal. Okay, that's the process, EASY, close. It is, by the way, loosely modeled inside the Tabernacle of Moses. I didn't find it there. I found it outside of there, and then I noticed, hey, that kind of looks like the pattern I see inside the Tabernacle. I don't have time to teach that right now because this whole teaching is, hours long, but you get the idea of where it comes from. Now, let me take you inside and show you just a little bit so you understand this. The E stands for engagement. How are you going to bring 15% improvement? And how's that going to turn out to be a whole lot more if you're only bringing a 15% improvement? Well, let's take a look at the engagement process. How are we going to do that practically? Well, we go to the parable of the sower. The parable of the sower models for you high probability selling. It says, behold, a sower went out to sow. And if you remember, there are 4 types of ground. But what a lot of people don't know and don't think about, by the way, this is a great teaching as well, just knowing this will so many times more return your investment just by doing this thing. If I'd have known that early in life, I would have done so much better, but I didn't know. But look at this. It's a very interesting stat that 17% of the seed in the parable of the sower produced 84% of the harvest. Had I known that, I would have focused on that 17% a lot more, but I didn't. If you know that, know how to define that and identify it, your profit, your time usage, everything will be far more advantageous. And again, I predict you'll get a much better return on your investment from the $997 we're talking about for this. Now, let me take you inside. We're going to use as an example, and I could spend a lot of time on this, but I'm not going to. We're going to start off and say, pretending that you have 100 opportunities, 100 prospects, and that you have a 30% PE ratio, meaning 30% conversion from a prospect to engaging them. In other words, you maybe call them, nobody returns your call, that kind of thing, but eventually you get through to 30% of them. And we're going to say, for the purpose of discussion, that you're going to make either a $5,000 sale or a $5,000 profit, whatever it is. And if you walk through this process and you have a 50% of the people that you've actually engaged say, okay, I'm interested, let's have an exploratory conversation. It might take place at the same time, it might take place the next day in person, depends what you sell. And from there, after having an exploratory call, there's 2/3 of them, 67%, say, okay, give me a quote, give me a presentation, I'm interested. From there, you start getting into some price justification and negotiations, and you close the sale. For argument's sake, we're going to say it's a 25% close ratio. It really depends on what you're selling, what product you're selling. Those closing ratios are going to vary from industry to industry. But in this hypothetical example, we've gone from $5,000 profit. We made 1.5 sales, on average. So that's $7,500 profit if we follow that ratio. Now, what I'm going to show you is this. We're going to add a 15% improvement to each step. Are you ready? Now, the 30% PE ratio goes to 34.5. That's a 15% improvement. And then that goes, the assess goes from 50 to 57.5, and so it goes all the way through the process. And you end up with a closing rate of 29% instead of 25%, which is a 15% improvement. But at the end of the day, you made 3.1 sales instead of 1.5 at $17,800 profit, which is a 235% increase just by bringing in a 15% improvement all through the process. That's what I love to teach you how to do, and that's part of it. By the way, you don't have to have a 235 increase in your profit or in your sales to obviously make your investment in this program worth it, but a 5% improvement would bring huge if you can do it incrementally at each step of the process. But if you don't have a process, lots of luck. Bottom line, you follow the process, you make the sales. Why? Because the process cooperates with how God wired us. Now, I'm not saying, just for the record, that you follow this process, you're going to get the sale. I'm saying you're going to get a lot more sales by following the process. And when you're not getting them, you can see, okay, I'm consistently not getting sales at this point. Somehow when I go from presentation to negotiations, I'm always losing or losing profit or whatever it is. So then we can identify what the problem is. Okay? That's the whole beauty of having a process and measuring your metrics. It's for your benefit. Which, by the way, brings me to the next thing, live group coaching. I have a weekly live group coaching option that most folks add to the purchase of the training. It's got accountability, it's got fantastic spreadsheets that you can use to track your metrics. You see it there on the left, identifying weaknesses, forecasting sales, really amping up your performance. And actually there's several spreadsheets, that's just one of them, but you get to track everything you do, put it in there, and it will feed out to you what your activity needs to be on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis. Or if you prefer, my goal is this, then it says, okay, well, if that's your goal, here's what you're going to have to do to achieve that goal. Okay, question. Does this approach to business interest you? I got to know that. You got to know that. I realize it may have felt a little bit like you've been drinking from a fire hydrant. I get that. But I do have a solution that'll help you not only retain this, but put it in practice and get results. Are you ready? It's the Selling Among Wolves membership program, 7 Secrets of the Sale. It's also known as, Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. That's what the marketplace is like. Therefore, be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. All of our product is 100% digital online. There's no physical product, but if it were, it would look something like this. The Science of Selling, Strategic Selling, 7 Secrets of the Sale, Power Principles, Negotiating Secrets of Paul, all this kind of stuff is there. But let me break it down for you right here. Level 1 is the Science of Selling. Now understand, I'm going to show you some of what's in there, but not all of it, because as I said, we've got 150 videos. I can't take the time to go through all of it. But some of the highlights include, of course, the easy close sales process that we just talked about and the sales fundamentals that go with that. Secondly, what we call right brain selling, left brain selling, the ASK method, which is ask, seek, and knock. You're going to love that. There's the PSS process, problem, solution, story. There's how to create a good value proposition, and the 7 natural laws of time management. Now, there's a lot more in there, but this is all I had room for on the slide. The value of that program is $1,495, and it's included as part of the overall online training package, the pricing of which I'll be getting into in just a few moments. There is a special promo code that you can use that'll give you 50% savings. So stay tuned. We'll be getting to that shortly. There's also level 2, the strategic selling. Okay, it's high probability selling that we showed you from the parable of the sower. It's the Moses questioning strategy that I talked about. It's 7 ways to communicate with impact based on the life of Christ and how he spoke and how he communicated. Motivational secrets of the 10 commandments. We guard and protect 10 legitimate motivational needs that everybody has. Winning the battle for the heart based on the Canaanite conquest and the etymology of the 7 tribes and what they mean and how you can win that battle for the heart. Presentation strategies of the Apostle Peter based on Acts chapter 2. Oh, that is absolutely amazing. and 12 mind hacks to regain and retrain your mind. So powerful. All of this, of course, is now level 2. This is where the Holy Spirit shines light on the scripture, and then you pull it out and say, how do I apply that to business, which we've done. The value for that package is $14.95, but it's included in the same one-time purchase you make. It's part of it. Then number 3, of course, are the power principles. It includes things like the law of favor, pursuing God, the law of grace, the law of faith, the Joshua mandate, the law of rest, the power of declaration. These are supernatural things that come into play that actually bring about a result that is not based on your human effort per se. It's based on you cooperating with God in a way where He moves on your behalf. I call it the power principles. The value for that particular course is $9.95, but as I said, it is included in the purchase of the program. And then there's the negotiating secrets of the Apostle Paul. I call it $1 Million Negotiating Secrets. There you have it right there. It includes things like the 9 psychological barriers to successful negotiating so many people are unaware of and are hindering them from being successful in negotiating. It's got the 31 strategies for win-win negotiations. And even though Paul's letter to Philemon only has 25 verses, I've got 31 strategies that'll change the dynamic of your negotiations and greatly increase your success rate. The value of that course by itself is $495, and it is also included. Also, there's what we call the Selling Among Wolves digital toolkit. Sales and marketing outcome planner with multiple spreadsheets. As you can see right here, there's, I think, 3 spreadsheets there. And it's a tremendous tool for tracking metrics, tracking your performance, predicting where you're going, business forecasts, all of that. That's included. There's also the Moses question strategies. We have over 100 questions that you can choose from and use and modify slightly for your business. I've actually included the actual client document that I had from back in the 90s, I guess it was, that brought them an extra $500,000 in 30 days. That actual document is there because sometimes it helps just to see, well, what did it look like? What was that like? So we got that for you as well. The total value of the toolkit is $495, and it's also included as part of the online sales school. I have 2 very special bonuses to tell you about. The first one is from Peter J. Daniels, Christian billionaire and statesman. He was an illiterate, 3rd-generation welfare recipient, and he was bricklayer. That's what he did. But in 1959, he walked into a Billy Graham crusade. I think it was in Melbourne, Australia, where he lives to this day. And he said, he told me, he said, I walked in as a pauper, essentially. Couldn't read or write or anything. I walked out as the son of a king. And I knew I was. Well, he went into sales, did pretty well, went into business, went broke, and he repeated that process 4 times. But on the 4th time, instead of going broke, he actually was successful and ended up making millions and then tens of millions and hundreds of millions and ultimately becoming a billionaire. His story is riveting. He loves God. He's done so many wonderful things in this world, you wouldn't believe it. I interviewed him. I interviewed him twice. I've got both those interviews that are included as a bonus inside. The value of that information is $495. You think, well, how could it be $495? Well, I paid many times that to have access to this information, and I'm sharing it with you. Now, bonus gift number 2 is an all-access pass to new ongoing Vault content, insights, recommendations, and tools as and when created. Meaning, from time to time, I'm getting something else. I go, oh my gosh, here's a great model. I test it. Yeah, it works. And I'll put it in the Vault for you. That has a value of an extra $1,500 easily, but that is also included. So here's what you're going to get. You're going to get the Science of Selling, which basically is proven best practices. You're going to get Strategic Selling, which is basically wisdom from God using biblically derived strategies, really. You're going to get the Power Principles, which helps you get the supernatural results. You're going to get multi-million-dollar negotiating secrets of the Apostle Paul. You're going to get the 7 Secrets of the Sale toolkit. You're going to get Peter Daniels' interview 1 and 2, and you're going to get any new content that we add. The value of that altogether is $6,970. So again, you get the entire online training school with 150 plus video lessons and bonuses. The value is $6,970, and it's available anytime you want online on our website for $1,994. However, if you use the promo code Elijah, you can get a 50% savings. That means you're only going to invest $997 to have lifetime access to the online training school. As I mentioned, there's an elite coaching program. Some of the details are this. It's a weekly group forum. It's every Friday at noon Eastern Time right now. That's how we do it, Eastern Time, United States, New York City time, if you will. This is where you bring your questions, your deals, your proposals. You get my direct input. Those calls are going to last anywhere from an hour to 2 or 3 hours, whatever it takes to make sure we get all of your questions answered. Now, all calls are recorded and they're posted inside the private Facebook page for Elite Coaching members. Why is that important? Because not everybody can make it Friday at noon. So you can go ahead and say, gee, I couldn't make the meeting, and you can catch it that evening or the next day, whenever you want to, and the whole recording's there and you can learn from it that way. It's a very powerful thing. In addition to that, however, part of that program, the coaching program, is unlimited email support, because we all have the moments, I don't know about you, but there are times when I think, man, I don't get this. I need some help. I need some assistance. How am I going to get that? Well, my elite members can email me 24/7 with their challenges, questions, or anything they want me to review. Sometimes it's a website, sometimes it's a proposal, sometimes it's a script. Last week, a couple weeks ago, I had somebody send me 2 other sales scripts that they weren't doing well enough with. And we quickly found the problem. He made the change. I made the recommendation. He made the change. Told me the very next week, everybody loves it. They're doing much better. So that's the kind of thing you get inside that. We respond usually within 1 to 2 days, depending on the topic. I may use that as a teaching moment with the entire group and even turn it into a video lesson.
And by the way, you can get the coaching as an add-on for just $97 a month when you use the special promo code Elijah. It'll cut your cost in half from $194 down to $97 a month. And by the way, you can cancel that anytime. There's no contract. Most people get in, they get the training. We've got 150 videos and growing. You'll get that, and you think, I think I want a little coaching to get going. And you may do it for 2 or 3 months. You may do it for 2 or 3 years. It's totally up to you. You can cancel that anytime you like.
Okay, one last thing. We have a 30-day happiness guarantee. I love that. I got that idea from my son. I love the wording of it. If you're not happy with your investment for any reason, even if it's day 29 at midnight, you can request a full refund and you'll get it. What that means to you is this: there's 0 risk. I don't know how to make it any better. I don't know how to make it any easier. There you have it. 0 risk. I have lots of endorsements from people like Wes Cantrell, the former CEO of Lanier Worldwide, a $1.2 billion corporation. He said, the techniques that Michael outlines will help make any product successful and should even be considered during the development process. Irresistible. Thank you, Mr. Cantrell. As you remember, I told you about the real estate company that I helped get on the Inc. 500 list. And so, but the premise of this is, and why he brought me in was because of what it says in Ecclesiastes. 2 are better than 1, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion, but woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. See, part of the coaching thing is I'm here to help you. That's the thing. I want to help you. That's why I'm doing this. I want to help you, all right? Now, the opportunity of a lifetime only lasts for the lifetime of the opportunity. And this is promotional pricing, and it will not last long. And the price will be going up. So I suggest that you order right now. The link is right below. Go ahead and get it now while we have the promotional pricing in play. Okay, there's 3 questions here only you can answer. Number 1, are you on target or are you falling short of where you wanted to be? Think about that. In your career the last 5 years, when you thought about it 3 years ago, 1 year ago, are you hitting those numbers? And by the way, maybe you're hitting them, but were you just shooting for a 5%, 10% increase? I mean, sometimes you can hit the goal because it's so easy. It's not really that inspiring, but you would decide that. I don't know. Number 2, will your current plan of action bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to go? And then number 3, what's it going to cost you in terms of lost opportunity, lost income, lost deals if you don't bridge the gap between where you are now and where you want to be? That's a calculation you have to make. So the 3 choices that you have, as I see it, is easy. Number 1, keep doing what you've always done. You'll probably improve, but the problem is, they say practice makes perfect. It doesn't. Practice makes permanent. So if you keep doing what you've always done, it's going to make those mistakes permanent. You don't want that. Number 2, you can figure this out for yourself. You've got the Bible. You know how to read. You've got the Holy Spirit. You can figure this out. You can do that. It's just going to take you a while. It took me 40 years. Probably won't take you that long, especially if you stand on my shoulders. And number 3, simply enroll right now. Order right now and get in. There's no risk. You have a 30-day back-out clause if you need to for any reason. So I recommend you jump in. It's not about me. It's about you. Your decision to invest in yourself today could be an absolute game changer for you. As my friend Ken Delaney said, if all this did was help you get 1 extra sale every few months instead of multiplying, like Ken told us he was able to do, would it be worth it to you? Again, math. This is where the logic, this is where wisdom comes into play. Bring your heart to wisdom. Sometimes your heart is fearful. Oh, I don't know. Look at the wisdom. I'm asking you to make the decision based on wisdom. All right? Say you want to talk it over with your spouse or your friend. All right? Well, sometimes that's just an excuse, and sometimes it's 100% legitimate. I don't know what your situation is, so I respect it. Okay? But here's what you should do. I would suggest enroll right now so you can secure the promotional pricing. What that's going to do, you're going to get 30 days to talk it over with whoever you want. And when you do, heck, maybe they'll share the cost with you and you both have access for the price of one. I will extend the access to a partner or a friend or whoever it is that you want to share it with. So you can definitely do that. But go ahead and get it now to reserve the pricing. Well, friend, I hope that was really helpful to you. The whole motivation of this is to equip you with biblical marketplace skills to improve performance on the job in your business, bottom line profits, and be a witness to the nations. You know, in Jeremiah, it says, you're standing at the crossroads. Ask where the path is that leads to blessing and follow that. For many people, this has been the path of blessing. This is the path that leads to blessing. If that resonates with your heart, if the desire has been quickened, and if you've brought your heart to wisdom and it makes sense to do it, and you feel the pleasure of God, jump in now, and let's work together. I look forward to meeting you and seeing you live in the Coaching Group on Friday. God bless you, and thanks for watching.